Okay, great. So, assalamu alaikum to everyone that's watching. Peace be upon all you all. This is a pleasure for me for today to interview one of my favorite people, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who is in the New York Ninth Congressional District. So, yeah, it's trying to get her on the screen now. There you go. So I wanted to welcome to our Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. I have the pleasure and the honor of being in her district, uh, I guess for about 16 years I've been here. So welcome aboard to ITV. And please, Yvette, let's not waste any more time. Give us a little bit about who Yvette Clarke is, where she came from, and how did you get to be a Congresswoman?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Brother Najee, and say Assalamu alaikum to all the sisters and brothers that have joined us. Peace be unto you. It's my honor and my privilege to represent the Ninth District of New York, which is Central and South Brooklyn. And I was born and raised in this constituency. I was born and raised in this community, this district. My parents were immigrants to the United States from the island nation of Jamaica, but I was born and raised in Brooklyn in largely an immigrant community that have welcomed people from around the world, all different backgrounds, cultures, and religions. And I was raised in that climate. And so I've always had a passion for service, to serve others. I think that to a large extent, that was cultivated out of the relationship that I had with my mother, the Honorable Dr. Una Clarke, who was the first foreign-born woman elected to the New York City Council here in Brooklyn. And she had always, just as part of navigating the US, reached out to organize in our community so that the children who were born in the US would have a wholesome environment in which to be educated, in which to build their character, in which to live a fulfilling life. It's not easy when you come from another nation to navigate the United States. And my mom was one of those people who made sure that all of our neighbors understood and had access to the resources that were available to them, and that she was a voice for particularly immigrants that didn't have a voice, that had not become citizens yet. And through her activism, we as a family really felt the passion of service. And I was her little daughter that was always by her side. And because of what I witnessed, what I experienced through life with my family and my parents, I too became someone who was passionate about making sure that the well-being of our community was addressed, confronted, and built upon. And so I'm honored to be with you today because it's in that tradition that I'm seeking re-election to the United States House of Representatives.
Okay, great. So, with the President Trump, as soon as he took over, one of the things that he implemented was the Muslim ban. How do you feel about that? And where were you when the Muslim ban happened?
Well, I was, he had been saying really nasty, horrible things about the Muslim community as he was running for office. So, I was pushing back from day one, encouraging our community to come out and vote, because without our pushback, this man was very, very dangerous. We fast forward, he's elected, and one of the very first thing he does is he attacks the Muslim community by putting in place a Muslim ban. I was at the JFK airport because I knew that many of our families were already in transit to the United States when this ban went into effect. People were waiting for their loved ones at the airport. The Customs and Border Protection were caught off guard. They didn't know what to do. And so we had to confront them right there at the airport to make sure that families would be reunited. Individuals who had valid visas to be here in the United States would not be obstructed. It was a strong battle. And, we still have not completely won this battle. I think, one of the things we have to do as we see the protests taking place across this nation is make sure that the drive for justice not only includes just Black lives, but all justice. And Black lives include Muslim lives, include the lives of those who have been discriminated against, and that we push to lift the Muslim ban, to get our families reunited, because at the heart of the United States of America is family reunification, is the ability to apply to be a citizen, is the ability to come to the United States, to make it your adopted homeland, and to be able to add value to our civil society. But I was in that fight, and I remember coming back to Coney Island Avenue and really bringing together the Muslim community in a town hall meeting to say, we who have the vote in the United States must use it now. We must use our power to be able to protect our sisters and brothers who are not yet citizens of the United States and who desire to become so.
That's perfect. That's a perfect segue for my next question. So, it's been a consistent attack. He's had a consistent attack on immigrant communities, minorities, even when he was running. He had this notion even before he even became, threw his hat in the ring to be a presidential candidate. So I've seen that he'd attacked Mexicans with the wall. Lately, he's been saying it's a Chinese virus, and and even one of his gatherings where an African American senior was being pushed and shoved. I mean, how is it, or what platform, or what is it on your plan to make that change and change the attitude, this divide, this huge divide that's in this country? What is it that you're planning to do or have done to bring the country back together instead of being so divisive with his leadership?
Well, I mean, that has been Donald Trump's prime strategy. It's to divide and conquer this nation. And his bigotry, his hatred, his xenophobia, his approach to dividing our nation has caused great upheaval. One of the things that I have done and have been doing ever since he was elected was I called very early on for the impeachment of Donald Trump, and was so proud to actually cast my vote to impeach Donald Trump. People seem to forget, though he wasn't convicted in the US Senate,
That's right.
he was impeached by the House of Representatives, and that will be a part of his legacy forever, forever. But that's not enough. The only way to get rid of this cancer that is Donald Trump is to vote him out of office. And that is where our power lies in this time. We have the power to change the destiny of this nation by using our vote. I will fight tooth and nail to the end to make sure that we are respected, that we are protected, that our humanity is given the room to grow and to flourish in the United States of America, that we take our rightful place as individuals who have come to make this nation greater and stronger. I will fight to the end to make sure that, we put laws in place that protect us from the type of evil, destructive policies that Donald Trump has used the White House to unleash on the American people and our descendants. And I will make sure that moving forward, we have an inclusive society, one that embraces us in all of our manifestations. And that's what I've been doing since I've been in Washington, D.C. I talk about the fact that I was born in this district. And, what people don't realize is this district has always been diverse. I share the story about, how my parents would be at work and they would rely on our neighbors to look after my brother and I until my parents would come home from work. One of our neighbors was a man that we call affectionately Brother Henry. Brother Henry had been living on our block for a long time, just like we had. He's a Muslim family. And, when I think about all of the people who helped shape my life, I think about the fact that it was people from around the world, from various backgrounds, different religions, and that embrace of my family was sort of extended beyond our own personal circumstances to embrace the circumstances of others around us. And we saw more in common in our quest for the American dream with our neighbors than we did those who were fighting against the fact that we were present, that we were here, and that we were making these contributions. And so when I go back to Washington, D.C., I think we're in a transformational time, Najee. I look at the multiracial, the intergenerational, the multi-religious coalition that has been growing in the streets ever since we witnessed the killing, the murder of George Floyd. And that brings me so much inspiration, so much motivation, and so much hope because, I've always said, this is not a battle that is only about some policies. This is the spiritual battle of good versus evil. And we're all feeling what it's like now to see systemic racism, to see systemic Islamophobia, to see how xenophobia has impacted our families, our communities, our access to the American dream. So I'm in this battle to win. And I want to make sure that our community feels empowered enough, feels strong enough, feels vocal enough, feels organized enough to push back and win this battle.
Great. So the New York, the 9th District, I've lived here for almost 16, 17 years with my family. And it's an amazing, amazing district. And I know it's extremely diverse. I mean, with a large portion of Asian, large portion of Caribbean, Jamaican, and also now there's a big flux of Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and folks from even some areas, Eastern Europe, European countries, and a large number of businesses in your district are basically owned by Yemeni Americans who have these small bodegas all around. And with this diversity and people really trying to make ends meet with the COVID and all the hatred that's going on, there's a lot of these folks that are also undocumented. So what platform or what do you think about, as far as DACA and the small businesses, if there's any relief for them and what have you?
Absolutely, Najee. One of the travesties in this crisis to me has been the fact that legislation that was signed by Donald Trump did not make provisions for those who were in between status. And, that was done intentionally. The CARES Act, which is the bill that was passed, originated in the Republican Senate. And we already know they don't share our values, and the fact that they have bought into Donald Trump's rhetoric and philosophy of demonizing immigrants. And, that has caused a lot of hardship in our community. We've seen families that were self-sufficient now relying on humanitarian efforts on the ground just to be able to feed their families. And when we talk about our small businesses, the fact that immigrants tend to be entrepreneurial has not been overlooked by me and by others. Some folks don't have sort of the paperwork to avail themselves of the current program, but we rushed back to Washington and originated a bill in the House of Representatives, which was passed, called the HEROES Act. And within the HEROES Act, we made provision for individuals that have individual tax ID numbers, which is the equivalent of a social security number. We made them eligible for all of the programs that were in the CARES Act. We made sure that those who are struggling to meet the financial needs of their rent and their mortgages, that we make the community whole. At the end of the day, it was the compliance of all of us in our community, regardless of status, that enabled us to really stem the tide of this COVID virus. The COVID virus ravaged the 9th District of New York. We lost many lives and many livelihoods, but due to the compliance and the support of our communities wearing masks, being socially distant, we are now on the other side of a peak of the pandemic. And I believe it's the responsibility of our government to make everyone whole. I noticed there was a rush by the Trump administration to undergird the cruise line industry and the airline industry and corporate America. But if it were not for the people, we would not be in New York State in a position where we're about to go into phase 2 of opening our businesses. And let me thank the Yemeni American entrepreneurs who own our corner bodegas, because they were a lifeline for our community. They were essential for our community, and at risk to their own lives and the lives of their families, they kept their stores open. They made sure we could get access to groceries, and we are indebted. We are indebted to all of those bodega owners that, again, could have said, you know what, I don't want to expose myself. I'm going to shut down my store until this thing is over. But each and every day, they kept their businesses open so that we could be healthy and strong, and we could survive this COVID crisis. So we owe them a debt of gratitude.
I appreciate that. And yes, and I visited many of them, and you know, they're also having a lot of difficulties surviving and making ends meet. But so one of the last questions I would like to ask you is, you know, I've been reading, you know, a lot and listening to Governor Cuomo about funds coming from the federal system. And as I've read, and I'm sure you have read, and that, you know, New York gives twice as much to the feds as it gets back. Where you have a state like Kentucky, who gives half as much as it gets back. It gives 50%, it gets 100% back. How is that possible that New York pays hundreds of billions of dollars of extra money and gets only half of that, and other states, you know, pay a small portion and get double back? Where's the justice in this? You know, I thought it is, you know, you give this much back, you get that much. You know, you give this much and you get this much back when you need it. And when New York needs it, New York is one of the, you know, most greatest cities in the country, probably in the world. And here we are begging for funds that basically New Yorkers have given, you know, time and time again, year over year, decade after decade.
Well, there are a couple of answers to that, Najee. You know, when you have the census being taken, and we don't fill out the census to reflect our presence here, we are giving power to other states like Kentucky. That's essentially what we're doing, because those communities will fill out the census.
Yeah.
And when we don't realize that we have power, regardless of our status, to meet the needs of our people, to have adequate representation because it's reflective of all of the people we represent, it's critical. You know, we don't realize that we give up a lot of our power because we don't do sort of the mundane and simplest things like fill out the census. So I want to encourage everyone who is listening to us, if you have not filled out your census, please, please, for the sake of your children and your grandchildren, fill out the census. It's filled out once every 10 years. So if we don't have 100% compliance, what will happen is the resources that we deserve get shifted to other parts of the country because it's not accurately reflecting the population. And the way that the funding is formulated is based on population. So one of the battles that our governor was fighting in the midst of this COVID crisis is making sure that we fought to make sure to ensure that the funding to meet the crisis was reflective of the rate of infection in our communities. And we were successful in doing that through the HEROES Act. Unfortunately, the Senate still has not acted on the HEROES Act. And that's where the replenishing of funds to our state and municipal government, our city and our state, would be found. Right now, we know they're going into great deficits because they've not been able to collect any taxes from us because we've been home. No one has been able to work. No one has been able to pay taxes. And, you know, it's a downward spiral. So I believe that the protest movement has to expand beyond the fact that, yes, racial injustice is paramount, but justice also has to mean economic justice. And in the HEROES Act, economic justice is at the core of what we have passed in the House of Representatives, and that's something that we can build from. We have to hold the U.S. Senate under Mitch McConnell accountable for what is happening in our communities. So what I would say to your question is, we defeat ourselves oftentimes when we don't recognize the significance and importance of our civic participation. And number one, or just as important, is not only filling out the census, but making sure that those of us who are registered to vote actually go out and cast our ballots.
Great, thank you very much for that. And you know, we've been talking about the census for a long time, and at this particular moment, the way you described it is so simplistic that that funding could have been here without any hesitation because of the numbers. So thank you for that. So the last question is, it's going to be a you know, a little difficult question for me to ask, but with so many people running against you, I know there's a councilman that all of a sudden wanted to become a congressman. I know there's other people that are also running. And I've been, like I said, I've been living here for 16 years, and I don't hear too much of anybody else doing anything until, you know, 5-6 months before the election comes, before the, you know, the primary comes in, all of a sudden you have a whole lot of noise everywhere. So tell us, you know, in your closing remarks on, you know, what is so important about electing Yvette Clarke to continue fighting for the 9th District? What qualifies you more than anybody else?
Well, let me say this, Najee. My work is not done on behalf of the people of the 9th District of New York. I believe I was born for a time such as this. And I'll tell you why. You know, I was born in the 1960s. So,
yeah,
you know, when I was a beneficiary of the civil rights movement of the United States of America, it was because so many had sacrificed their lives that I was able to get a great education. My parents were able to work and purchase a home in this community. That the battle for racial, economic justice in this country has been going on since that civil rights movement. And I've always recognized that without justice, fairness, and equity in our society, we would never reach and attain the American dream. Fast forward, this district has elected me 7 times to represent them. And in this moment, I am now in leadership. I've gotten the seniority in Washington where my leadership is valued, where I'm at the table helping to actually make those decisions that impact our lives. You know, I'm the only Black woman in the New York State congressional delegation. And my lived experiences make a difference when we're talking about comprehensive immigration reform. You know, I was at the table. I'll give you a quick story. When the negotiation around comprehensive immigration reform was taking place with the US Senate. And one of the things that they wanted to negotiate away, or 2 things that they wanted to negotiate away, Najee, were diversity visas, as well as the visas that are used for family reunification. I almost turned over the table and I told them, under no circumstances would our communities accept not being able to be reunited with their families, not being able to have access to visas from nations where if you don't have wealth, you're unable to come to the United States. You know, when I think about places like Yemen, where I think about places on the continent of Africa, where, you know, people are still struggling, you know, to lift themselves economically, socially. These are the individuals that have made a difference in our communities, that have come to the US, and they want to make sure that their families can benefit from the fact that they are making a difference in the United States, and they can make a difference in the shaping of the US foreign policy. That's where my voice comes in, because I live these experiences with the people of the 9th District of New York. To get someone who has expressed no interest in our communities, have not lived through the struggles that make and define the people of this district, to see this as an opportunity to be self-promoting or to be opportunistic. I think the stakes are way too high for our community for us to fall for that. And so I'm asking people to reelect me once again so that I can take this leadership and demand and attain the changes that we've all been wanting. And I'm right at the table where that occurs. I'm hoping and praying that we'll continue to come out and vote in the general election to change the US Senate and to change the White House. That puts us in a unique position to finally accomplish the justice that we've been seeking.
Great. So the last one that just popped into my mind, can you tell us a little bit about the, you know, the Black and Latino caucus in the Congress?
Sure. So the Congress is a little bit more, is designed a little bit differently than the state. We have separate caucuses. So in the federal government, we have what we call the CBC, which is the Congressional Black Caucus. Then we have the CHC, which is the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And then we have the Asian and Pacific Islander Caucus. And each of us meet, and then we meet together in something called the Tri-Caucus. And the Tri-Caucus brings together all of those caucuses of color to address the issues. And just in this last Congress, we actually elected the first ever Native American women to the House of Representatives. And so now we have what we call the Tri-Caucus +2. And, you know, we are really reflective of the diversity of America now in a very special way that I think takes us into the 21st century with the assurance that everyone's needs and everyone's concerns can be addressed, whether it's the multiracial or the multi-religious, because we have more Muslim Americans that are in the Congress now than we've had in a generation.
Thank you very much for tuning in today and sparing some of your time. I know the election is today, and tomorrow is the last day. And I'll give you 15 seconds to say one more thing, and we will close this show off.
Let me first of all thank you, Najee, not only for hosting today, but for your leadership in our community. It's the coalition, the bond that we have built over many years, recognizing that it's important that every segment of our society are organized, are empowered to be in the midst of transforming our society. And when I see what you all have, what you and Debbie and so many other leaders have done in organizing Yemeni American merchants through Yama, when I see the emergence of an organization like Engage that is bringing forward the Muslim voice in America, when I see so much happening on the ground for our communities, it strengthens me, it lifts me, because this is the vision that I've always had for our communities. It reminds me of when my mother initially started organizing immigrants when she was running for office, because for a long time, people just assumed that immigrants would not vote, that immigrants would not engage, and she broke that barrier. And so I'm building on that legacy, and I want to encourage everyone in this time. This is our time to make a difference. This is a transformational time for our society, and each and every one of you can play a role in making the difference in everyone's lives. Let me thank you for tuning in today. Let me thank my brother Najee for this interview. I am excited about tomorrow's election, and I want to ask that you go out, you vote, and you bring others to vote for Yvette D. Clarke for Congress. Assalamu alaikum, sisters and brothers, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Yvette, and thank you, ITV, for always being there for the community, for giving us a time of, to speak with our sister, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. And even though tomorrow is the election, I know she has 1,000 things to do, but it was a pleasure having you, with us today. And congratulations on your past, successes, and wish you the best for tomorrow.
Yes, and the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.